well, yes and no. Michael Aquino was part of, before the book on ritual abuse, I was the researcher for what was turned out to be not a very good film about Satanism and ritual abuse. And we filmed Michael Aquino for that.
Now, how difficult? That was just right at the start of the accusations against him at the Presidio.
The accusations had been made, and I think the internal judge advocate general procedures, if that's what they were still ongoing at that point.
Now, I watched a bit of that interview. It's available. It was just put on YouTube just very recently. It isn't like
really? I haven't seen that for best part of 30 years.
I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the interview, he and Lilith, his wife, were very aggressive with the interviewer.
Yeah, they were not pleased to be asked about this.
Yeah, now how did that come about? What made them agree to come on in the first place?
Aquino was then running something called the Temple of Set.
Right.
And he had recently established a British branch of the Temple of Set, which was run by a British Satanist, who was amenable to talking to me, and indeed gave us an interview. And through him, it was suggested that Aquino, if we paid, and we did, the television station did pay for his flight and accommodation, he would come over and talk about Satanism and what he wanted to do with the Temple of Set.
So for a very small compensation, he exposed himself in the middle of an investigation?
That is what happened.
Okay, now when things started getting testy in that interview, because he is a guy with considerable military influence and power within the U.S. military, did he have bodyguards with him? What was that like? No,
there were no bodyguards. Absolutely none.
Absolutely no bodyguards, right? Like that.
It was him, Lilith, and, as I say, this man called David Austin, who then led the British branch of the Temple of Set.
Now, he's very litigious. Did they threaten you with a lawsuit or any kind of... How did it end up at the end of the interview? Okay, hey, let's, shook hands. Let's go out for a pint. What happened?
I wish I could remember.
Okay.
And the simple truth is I can't. This was 1989, so what are we... That's 26 years past, and there's been a lot of film through the gate and a lot of books through the presses since then. And I honestly cannot remember how did we part on a happy note over a gin and tonic or a pint of beer. I honestly can't remember.
Now, like you said, 40 years of doing this kind of work and hard-hitting topics. This is serious business. Do you regret anything over the 40 years of taking this road, this hard road?
Yeah. As we've discussed, I deeply regret persuading Troy Bonner that he would be safe if he gave us an interview. I don't see how I can ever reconcile that, because the fact is that he wasn't safe, and that because the film wasn't broadcast, he was even more unsafe, and he certainly felt unsafe. I regret that. I regret that the book on ritual abuse had to be withdrawn. I think it's still, you can get second-hand copies on Amazon, but I think there is useful information in there. I think it's the only time that someone has attempted to take a serious, forensic, secular look at these allegations and to try and sift the wheat from the chaff. I regret that that's no longer there. Do I regret anything else than that personally for me? No. I'm incredibly fortunate that I have been able and funded to make films and write books about stories and issues that I think need to be told. And people may say, well, that's a very arrogant thing. Why should you get the money just to make the films you think need to be told? But that's the best I can do.
Now, what projects are you working on right now that you have coming up in the future?
Well, I've just had these 2 books out, and I had a film out at the same time, so I was actually writing 2 books and making a film all at the same time. So you've caught me taking a breath.
Okay.
For the first time in 9 months, and really rather enjoying it.
Now, looking back over your career, is there a story that you covered that you wish had gotten more public attention and something that's really important to you that you wish more people knew about?
Yeah, 2. There are 2. For the life of me, I cannot understand why they haven't had more attention. The first was a film about the assassination of Bobby Kennedy.
Okay.
Now, I'm not a Kennedy nut. I have no views or expertise on the assassination of Jack Kennedy. But in 1988 it was, someone approached me and said, somebody needs to look at the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. And I said, well, it was Sirhan. He's serving life in Soledad for this. And they said, well, no, not really. There's a lot more to it. And at that point, one of the first things that I came up against was that all the files, and I mean all the files, all the evidence, was still under seal. This is 1988. Finally, by 1990, it had been released to the Sacramento State Archive, the California State Archive in Sacramento, and I think I was probably one of the first people in there going through this. And it was one of those moments where I just sat back and I thought, why on earth is no one else concerned about this? And I said that for a very simple reason. Again, I don't know, your listeners will almost certainly know this better than anyone in the UK. Bobby Kennedy was shot in 1968 in the pantry of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. He'd just given an acceptance speech. He'd won the California primary. That was pretty much going to put him on track to be the Democratic presidential candidate in 68, and he would, I think it's commonly accepted, have wiped the floor with Nixon. He was shot in the pantry. Sirhan was in the pantry and had a gun and was jumped on and apprehended, but Bobby died pretty much on the floor there. And that's kind of the Wikipedia version of events. What the documents, all the investigative documents which I found showed was that Sirhan physically could not have shot Bobby Kennedy. And the reason is that every single witness, and there were 17 of them, placed Sirhan in the pantry in front of Bobby Kennedy, and the closest his arm with a gun in it ever got to Kennedy was 3 feet. The autopsy report, which hadn't been put into the what limited trial proceedings there had been, and which was finally, as I say, released to the State Archives 20-something years later, showed that Kennedy had been shot from a distance of no more than 3 inches from behind his right ear. Sirhan physically could not have done that. And I went and I found the coroner who carried out the autopsy. Tom Noguchi was known as the coroner to the stars.
Right.
And Noguchi was an old man by then. He's dead now. And he said, no, you're absolutely right. And I said that at the time, and he did. And no one paid any attention. And so in 1991, I think, I made this film, and I dug up an enormous amount of material and eyewitnesses. And the behavior of Los Angeles police was bizarre through this. And once you show that Sirhan couldn't have done it, and Sirhan, bear in mind, has no memory of this, you have to ask the question, well, if he didn't do it, who did? And that's where it got very interesting, because there had been any amount of testimony which should have pointed the LAPD to look for the real killers. And they didn't just ignore it, they studiously shut it down. They threatened people, they threatened witnesses. And they destroyed evidence, and they locked up evidence. And we made the film. It was broadcast on A&E in the States and over here on Channel 4. And we showed quite plainly what had happened. And I also dug up audio tapes, which somebody else had once had, which showed why it had happened and who had been involved. And yet that story doesn't really get told these days. And I don't understand why.
And they actually just in the past 10 years or so demolished the entire Ambassador Hotel, which was, if anything, an architectural landmark, besides.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was there filming in LA, it was all shuttered up and behind big wire enclosures, and you couldn't get at it. But that this man, and I'm a child of that era, I suppose. Bobby Kennedy was, even on this side of the Atlantic, a symbol of hope.
Right.
That this man was murdered, and the man who is serving out his days in prison.
Wherever you go, Direct Auto Insurance will be there for you. Whether it's early morning on your way to work or at night after a long day on the other side of town with a few errands still left to do, wherever you are, we've got you covered. To find out how you could save up to 25% and take advantage of flexible payment options, call or stop by any of our 450 Direct Auto stores for a free quote, or visit us at directauto.com. Rates, savings vary. Terms and conditions apply to coverage, discounts, and pay plans. How you buy could impact price. Direct Auto Insurance and insurers in the National General Group, Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
I always wanted to explore my business potential. Florida Technical College helped me make that possible. Thanks to FTC, I earned my degree in entrepreneurship, marketing, and management. I am an Iris Bermudez, and I work in finance.
See why Florida Technical College has been the choice of people like you since 1982. Learn more about our careers in business and in information technology, including entrepreneurship, management and marketing, and more at ftccollege.edu or call 888-981-9707. FTC, your partner in success.
Just simply could not and did not do it. And with what we discovered about who was almost certainly behind it, then I find it astonishing that so little attention is paid to that.
Well, who did you conclude was behind it?
This is where, when I say the three letters, people are going to say, oh, God, here goes a conspiracy theory. What we said was, the evidence pointed to the CIA, and here's why.
Okay.
The CIA had, and I know this to be a fact because I have the documents, the CIA's own documents, had in the early and mid-1950s been working on a program, and this is their phrase, to create a robot assassin, end quotes. They called it Project Artichoke. Now, it sounds the stuff of fiction, but I actually got no great feat because you could do that through Freedom of Information. I got the documents in which the CIA described what they were trying to do, which was to create a hypno-programmed assassin who would kill either a visiting head of state or a U.S. politician. This is their documents, not me saying